Hello everyone, and welcome to the Cloak and Arrow. This is something of a departure from my normal content, I suppose, considering up until now my presence has more or less been confined to Instagram and my podcast, but as well as my Patreon. However, I have decided to branch out a little bit. And I've published one YouTube video before this, which is kind of funny. It was way back, like 2 years ago, I think. Actually, a little more than that. And there are a number of people who I'm sure are probably still around, knew me back then, remember it. I think it is still up on the channel. And it was just a fun, short, 3-minute or so video. Pardon. That's somebody driving past on our road. But I am sitting outside my lovely little home. And I have decided that to pass the time in this video and to keep me occupied somewhat, I will be cleaning my boots, as well as discussing what exactly my plans are for the channel, and really just commenting on some different things that I think some of you may like. So firstly, many of you are boot connoisseurs like myself. This is a pair of Nicks that I actually just got. They are about a week old, 8 days old actually. And these are also pair of Nicks, my first pair, about 3 years old now. And this is my second oldest pair. They're going on a year old now. So if you don't know, if you're just stumbling across me somehow, then perhaps I can tell you a thing or two about myself. And that is, I am a forester. I specifically work in timber procurement and land management. And in that career, I find myself enjoying boots, good boots, quite a good bit. And I think that's a good thing because, well, for one, good footwear is one of those things I think you should always spend the money on. Consider the fact that if you're not in your bed, you're probably in a pair of boots. If you're a working man, that is. So I would say everyone who finds themselves in a pair of boots should truly be spending good money on those boots. And that comes down to my philosophy, my personal philosophy about life in general, and that is that if you're going to spend money on things, you ought to spend good money on good things. Because, especially in our world right now, everything is just becoming increasingly expensive. And it really is hard to catch up. And, oh, darn. It's hard to stay caught up with everything, and it's hard to make enough money for everything you feel you might need. And so, one way I find solace is by simply not spending money on things that I don't need to spend money on. Now, goodness, a loud vehicle. I would say that it probably is the case that most of us find ourselves spending more money on the things we don't want to spend money on than the things that we do want to spend money on. Just yesterday, my wife and I were talking about how she, at her work, she came across or I suppose they actually send these around, pass these around the office, something talking about inflation in the US and how inflation is projected to be down to, 3.1% by the end of the year. Well, that's lovely, right? Except for there's a caveat, and that's that the inflation is only going to be it's only going to be that low for, things other than food and energy. So I suppose that's a good thing, except for the fact that we find ourselves spending most of our money on food and energy. We don't buy a lot of other things. We don't do a lot of things. In fact, we don't have internet at the house, which does beg the question, how am I going to upload this? If you ever see this video, then you'll know that I was successful. But we don't have internet. We don't have TV. We have a TV. It was a gift from my in-laws, a wedding gift. I did not have a TV until I was married. But we don't exactly find ourselves using it too often, so it's quite okay. But something we really should consider, though, back on topic, is if we're spending so much money on the things we don't want to spend money on, and if you're like me and you don't make a whole lot of money, you don't have a lot of disposable income, then maybe you ought to consider more closely how and where you spend your money. It might sound crazy to most, especially if you're not a worker, right? Or at least not someone who has a job that has you outside or working manual labor or anything like that. You'll probably be shocked at the price tag, say, on a pair of boots like these. $500. That's about how much I paid for those. Part of the trades program with Nick's. These are Nick's boots, I already said that. Nick's has a trades program, which is actually quite neat. I would recommend anyone, if you are looking at getting a pair, if I am able to convince you by the end of this video, go through that program. But I would say that, perhaps if someone had told me that I would own multiple pairs of $500 boots by the time I was in my mid-20s, I would probably look at them and call them crazy. And again, young me didn't know how much money was worth, nor how much money I would be making, nor did I even understand, I suppose, how exactly I would end up getting money. I don't think I thought that I would be in forestry, because if I'm being honest, when I was young, I didn't really know forestry was a thing. My father is a geologist. My mother is a nurse practitioner. And to both of them, the idea of a good education and a good investment for your future was the university system. At least for a time, it's staying with salt, if you ever wonder how hot it gets down here in Mississippi. For a time, I did not believe that I wanted to go to college. I did not think that I would. I was utterly convinced I would go and be a mechanic. Actually, I considered being a diesel mechanic. Then I realized that most people who drive diesels, at least in South Carolina where I grew up, were not good people. So I decided I didn't want to be a diesel mechanic. That's somewhat tongue-in-cheek. I'm sure there's plenty of good diesel drivers, just not if their trucks are squatted. If you drive a squatted truck, you will be cast into the outer dark, where there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. However, I did not think I'd be going to college. Yet I ended up going to college, and frankly, I think it was a pretty good idea, despite the fact that it cost a lot of money. I did meet my wife and convert to Catholicism over here in good old Mississippi, which is funny. It really is. You'd never think that someone would come to Mississippi and become a traditionalist conservative. And I mean actual conservative, not like a GOP conservative. But thus is the case. That is what happened. and I met my lovely wife, and so that education is in many ways priceless. But I also learned that forestry was a thing. I learned I quite enjoyed it, because one thing that I began to do a lot of when I came to school was outdoor things. Going and camping, climbing, hiking, whatnot. It's not to say that I didn't do that when I was younger, but I didn't do it with as much freedom as I did and do as an adult. And so now, I'm met with this reality that I can kind of go wherever I want, do whatever I want, spend my money how I want. However, I did not have much money. So, because I was a college student, where all of my money went to school and trying not to starve. But I was met with this reality that, money does have value. There is value in what I'm doing, this education that I'm getting, and I would like to, basically, to grow and to be a good man and to learn how to manage myself and do things. And I think one of those ways, sounds very vague, I'm sure, and that's because it is. One of those ways that I learned that was I began to greatly appreciate quality goods. One of those examples, obviously, is boots, footwear, but also, other examples, like a quality knife. I quite enjoy a good quality knife. It's one of my favorite things. This is a bushcrafter from Primitive Woodsman, and it is a very, very neat knife that I like a lot. I actually have a good friend who is wanting to get one of these as well. So, yeah, I got this recently, though. I got it off of a Facebook group, because I never buy anything full price. It's one of my secrets. And when I went on this Facebook group, I found it, this knife, went ahead and got it. And part of the reasoning is because I wanted to compare this knife to another knife that I have, another premium knife, Winkler Woodsman. If you've ever heard of Winkler knives, you'll know that they're certainly well liked and well respected in the world of knife making. And Daniel Winkler made the knives, most of them, I believe all the bladed weapons, or at least most of them, for The Last of the Mohicans. It's one of my favorite movies. I had to do it. So I've had that for quite a while, and I've decided I wanted to get this knife. I wanted to spend the money on it and go ahead and basically compare the two and add to my collection, because I figure having more than one good knife and helping you all to learn how to properly discern what makes a good knife, or what makes a good pair of boots, or a good purchase in general, would be something that would be useful. So, part of that is something of the purpose of this channel, right? Is to talk about my life, things I enjoy, things I spend my money on, right? Not everything, but some things, and talk about my philosophy in general. Because if nothing else, I suppose I'm something of a philosopher, though not a very good one, nor the brightest, but I at least strive to be a good one, and I strive to have good things to say. But, all that being said, the philosophy of buying good things, good quality things, and taking care of those things, I think teaches a young man a lot about his place in life, his station in life. I've heard it said before, many different good men, you can tell a lot about a man by his boots. So I've also heard these same men say that you can tell a lot about a man by how he treats his tools. And I think that does extend to both, tools that you work with, as well as, the things that you wear, things that you use, such as boots and whatnot. And so, this philosophy of mine, I do share with my wife. And for instance, we've bought numerous linen dresses, nice linen dresses, well-made linen dresses. They're very expensive And it would seem absolutely insane for most people to buy it. I suppose it is a bit of an insane choice, right? But until we have the capacity and the setup and the skills to make them on our own, I think it is worth the money, right? It's worth the expense because these are things that will last a long time, can be passed down, can be repaired, and everything. In a world of fast fashion and, frankly, complete and utter degeneracy, where people don't much care for the things that they put on their body, because people don't actually believe that there's dignity to dress or dignity to the goods that you own or use, you have a duty, I think, as a good and upstanding moral individual, good man, a young man, whatever, and even as a woman as well, obviously as a woman, I think you have a duty to uphold your own dignity and the dignity of the work that you do, the things that you do. See, something you see a lot of today is not only, obviously, grave immodesty in dress, but also just rampant, a rampant lack of dignity, an undignified manner of dressing among most people. All these people, perhaps not all of them, but many of them, spend their whole lives wearing nothing but what more or less is underwear. Now think of all the men who walk around wearing athletic wear as if they're going to go just, go for a nice jog in their tracksuit at any moment. Or women who wear tight spandex because they just want to do it for themselves and because they think that it's absolutely essential that they dress like prostitutes in their day-to-day. Obviously, these people are very disordered in their view of what is good, true, and beautiful, in their view of what they need to be doing, and how to do it, properly, how to live their lives. And I think the reason for this disordering is because people don't actually know where they are in life, or why they're alive. When you understand that you do have a higher purpose, I obviously, as a husband, firstly, that is my vocation. Hopefully soon as a father, I've been praying my wife and I have been praying for almost 9 months now that we might welcome children into this world. So I ask that anyone watching or listening also pray for us. But there's a philosophy that is completely lost on most people, and it is this philosophy that I'm parroting, I suppose, that I'm working my way to very long-windedly and difficultly, painstakingly perhaps, because I like to waste people's time, not really. But a lot of people have lost the plot. They do not understand that they do have a vocation, something that they're called to. They do not understand that there is dignity in all that they do. Most people are very lazy, very slothful. I myself am one of them. God forgive me, please. Most people waste their time a lot and do not do their due diligence in their work, be that day to day, at the 9 to 5, or in their vocation, in their life. And this comes from, obviously, the concupiscence that we all share as men, right? This concupiscence, this disordered inclination towards sin, as St. Thomas Aquinas would define it, is a consequence of the fall of man. And it's not something that we very easily understand in some cases. I think it's very easy for us to say that, or to try and dismiss it and say that, well, that's just the way everyone is. And since everyone's like this, by the way, I'm using saddle soap. Since everyone's like this, and since everyone does it, it's perfectly fine. That means I am okay doing it as well. This is obviously untrue. And it's a very grave, terrible way of looking at things. I really should have a horsehair brush, but alas, I have left it inside, and I do not care to go get it right now. You know what? No, I don't need it. Yes, so either way, it's very sad, I think, that people do not know why they're alive, what they're living for. It's very sad that these people cannot fully grasp their purpose in life, but it's also simply a part of it, a part of this life that we live, right? The concupiscence, this disordered inclination towards sin that we all suffer from, is something that every single man, woman, and child has suffered from since the fall of man. It's not something you can just get away from. It's also not something that you should be too nonchalant about. See, there are solutions to this, to all of these things, right? What is the solution to man's sin? Well, obviously it is Jesus Christ. It is the sacramental life, and it is the church, which was founded by our Lord Jesus Christ. And that is obviously a true answer, yes. It is a good answer. In fact, I don't think there's a better answer out there. But what I do think is that our views of that are that the church is to give us a solution immediately and outwardly at any given time, or that God has to lift us out of our own brokenness on our time, and that it does not require any kind of cooperation with His grace. This is obviously false, and it is a very dangerous thing to think, because if you do not operate under this understanding that you must cooperate with the grace of God, you're going to end up with a semi-Pelagian worldview. Pelagianism, obviously being if you are unaware, the heresy basically of works-based salvation. Pelagius, the arch heretic from, I believe this was the 3rd century, it might have been a little later. Pelagius said that there is no original sin. Actually, I think it was 4th century. There is no original sin. In fact, men are not sinful at all. Every man starts out not naturally sinful. He said that every man starts out as a blank slate, and that his deeds are what decide whether or not he is worthy of heaven. This naturally and necessarily precludes us from needing to give ourselves to God, to our Lord Jesus Christ, and of course to His, it makes His sacrifice somewhat worthless, because what's the point of a blood sacrifice for the sins of all mankind if the sins of all mankind don't really actually mean much, And so this is something that I think a lot of people, unfortunately, hold on to, even Catholics, and good Christians and everything, because they hear this phrase, which is very common in America especially, and it's that God helps those who help themselves. This is, in some capacity, true, because if you do not seek to do anything in your life, and you do not seek to live out your life according to God's grace and according to the manner in which He desires for you to live, then yeah, you're gonna be out of luck. But that's the point. Obviously, luck's not real, but that is the point, though, is that it's not God helps those who help themselves, because sometimes we cannot actually truly help ourselves. But most of the time, we actually can't help ourselves, because ourselves, our person, is inherently wicked and terrible. Human nature is good, but also human nature is flawed and evil, right? Man desires good naturally. He just desires it in excess, and that excess leads to certain very grave and gravely disordered realities in the world, obviously, that being the realities of sin. So, God helps those who help themselves is not true in and of itself. But what is true is that God helps those who cooperate with His grace. This is obviously the case when you look at salvation history, and you look at, obviously, just the reality of most people in their brokenness and their inability to help themselves and to do anything. Think about the addict, the alcoholic. Goodness, how many young men are addicted to pornography? How many of them can help themselves? I would argue that almost none of them. And this is not to say that, they're all at fault or all alone or need to be stricken from the book of life, but it is to say that You cannot help yourself. Man can't help himself from wanting to sin. And that is a scary thought, right? I am tempted all the time to do sinful things. And there go I, but by the grace of God. Were not for the grace of God, I would certainly be a terribly, horribly sinful man, far worse than I am now. And that's not something that I say lightly. Because I think it's easy for us to, look at things and, look at the worst people, right? Look at the homeless. Now, most of them today, as we see them in their current iteration in the Western world, are just the worst. They are terrible. And it's really hard to love them because you see in them that everything that you hate as a civilized man, you see in them something terrible. You say, I never want to be like that. But there go you, but by the grace of God. If not for the grace of God, you would be like that. And so, God helps those who cooperate in their grace. As Our Lady says in her Magnificat in Luke chapter 1, she says, He hath lifted up the lowly, and He hath... So, goodness, I'm forgetting now. I was just thinking of it, and now I've forgotten. Oh yeah, He hath cast down the mighty from their thrones, and He hath lifted up the lowly. So, there's this idea, right, that humility, lowliness, is what ultimately leads us to goodness. That if we are lowly by choice, if we recognize our sinfulness, and we know that we're broken, and we accept that we're broken, and then we seek redemption, we seek to be better, then we will be lifted up. Not on our own, not of any of our own accord, our own volition, but because God loves us and He desires that for us. So He will save us from ourselves if we cooperate with His grace. Of course, the mighty, who are so great and so powerful and have all the earthly things which they could ever desire, they are cast down from their thrones. And they will not inherit eternal life. So, moving on, back to kind of the point of this though. Obviously, I like rambling like this. I like talking, I like writing. I don't know, if you're listening to this or watching this, you have probably read some of my writing. I ask you, please, don't tell me what you think. I'm sure it's not good things. I'm hardly a good writer. But I do think that if you've made it this far, then maybe you think I have something good to say. And so I ask you to please stick around and I guess hear what else I have to say. So either way, that's the point of this channel though, is I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna talk a lot. And I'm gonna do things. Perhaps I'll show you guys cool things and, talk about some gear. And when I say gear, I don't necessarily mean just, tactical gear. As many of you probably know me from my Instagram, Nutria. I'm not necessarily just going to talk about that, because I don't think that's really the most important thing in the world. But I will tell you what I think about a lot of things, and I hope you will listen to that. I obviously will talk about my faith, talk about good books, talk about pipe smoking. If you'd like to listen, though I'm an amateur, certainly. I'm no Dr. Alan Harrelson, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But it is something I enjoy. So, my dear friends, I ask you this question. I don't suppose I'll go yet. But tell me in the comments, tell me what else you would like to see in this channel before I move on. I'm not going to do, tactics or anything like that. If I ever do anything, it'll just be fun. And of course, you have nothing to learn from me that you cannot learn better from someone else. If you're here because, like I said, you think I have something good to say. You think there's something to what I am saying. And I thank you for that, certainly. I think it's very flattering, actually. But you probably know, again, if you are here, that I am a silly guy. Very silly man. With lots of silly things to say. But either way, I keep repeating myself. Moving on, something that I think is very important, a very important topic that people are forgetting about in the light of certain current events, political events and everything in between. Something a lot of people have been saying recently. They've been talking about the VP and the president, of course, too, as well, President Trump. His VP pick kind of picks everything in between. There's a lot of rumors going around. There's a lot of stuff going around that is kind of silly, I think. It's all very intense, and I think there's a lot of people that are just getting really worked up over things they maybe don't think a lot about or know a lot about. Many of you, as has been the case with me as well in the past, suffer from a type of psychosis, I think, where we think that everyone truly is out to get us at all times. And yes, we know that the enemy, the evil one, he prowls like a roaring lion, seeking to devour us, as St. Paul says. But we also know that just because our enemies are in power, right, doesn't mean that everyone who is in power is our enemy. And I think people need to understand the virtue of prudence when it comes to politics, be able to recognize the obvious issues with cutting yourself off from the political life of your nation. I don't like politics in the general, or in the American sense necessarily. I like politics in the general sense because I think politicking, I think religion and politics are the backbones of conversation. I think if you can't discuss those things, you're probably a weasel of a man. I don't like politics. I don't talk about religion. Can't we talk about something else? Yeah, like what? Sports? No, I'm not talking to you about sports. What else are you going to talk about? I mean, if you want to talk to me about fishing, then go for it. That's great. Hunting's fun too. But there are deeper things and more important things than just recreational activities. Also, if you ever talk to me unsolicited or unannounced about TV shows or video games that were made within the last 5 years, I will never speak to you again. But, yes, this political prudence that I speak of is lacking immensely, and young people especially. I will not say explicitly who or why or whatever, who's in power, you know the people. But I will say that the constant obsession with these things is unhealthy. And if you cannot look to the good in your life and in the life of your nation, and you cannot recognize a moral evil and then something that opposes a moral evil as being different, then there's something wrong. And I absolutely, I wish that we had a Catholic monarch, and that, we could do all kinds of, things to fit my niche political views. But I also know that that's not realistic. And if I go seeking someone who fits a candidate or just a nation or something that fits all of my niche political views and never actually look at the reality of the nation that we live in, I will be sorely disappointed, and I will likely be horribly disenfranchised as well. Because if we do not allow ourselves, we are Christians, right? We are not supposed to be of the world, but we are supposed to be in it still. If we cut ourselves off from all this stuff, we will find ourselves disenfranchised in the same way that we are now, except for even worse, and to a greater capacity. That is frightening, I think. I think if you do not see that and think, oh no, that's a bad thing, then there is something wrong with you. Because, Our nation is in a bad spot. It has been for quite a while. The relentless assault of liberalism has ever been the scourge of civilized society. But we also need to be careful not to seek out basically reactionary progressive ideologies and views that only exist to fight back against these extreme things. I think something good, a good ideology, ought to naturally fight back against the evil of the world and of the liberal world order. And I think you ought to separate yourself reasonably from the world. I mean, when I say be politically prudent, when I say involve yourself kind of organically and healthily with society, I'm not saying you should spend all your time worrying about that. I'm not saying you should spend all your time involving yourself with it. I think actually most of your time should be involved in prayer and spending time with friends and family. And actually tonight, as of recording this video, my wife and I will be having a good friend over. He is a man, he is also a converted to Catholicism the year before me, and I met him the year of my conversion. And he's been a great friend ever since. And I love him dearly. And I think if I could not have him over, my wife and I could not have him over and be joyful and appreciate the time we have with him, who we number amongst our loved ones, then we would be very sorrowful people, and we would have very little joy in our lives. The same goes for anyone who worries too much about money. There are many people who spend their whole lives being conservative with their money and worrying, if I need to make more money, I need to spend more time working, because if I don't do that, then what if this happens, or then I won't be able to provide for my family. But then they'll only have 2 kids. Very common thing with the older generations especially, where they had 1 or 2 kids, maybe 3. They destroyed the big families. Obviously, no more big families. You don't do that, because how could you afford it? How could you afford big vacations? Fancy stuff, a new boat, and new cars every 2 years. How could you do it? And that's a really sad thing, because these people often die regretful and sad and lonely. Because if their children even had any children of their own, they probably don't care much for their grandparents. And they probably don't care much for their parents either, because their parents probably spent more time working than they did loving their children. And thus we have the great predicament of our age, the same one that leads to rapidly declining birth rates and materialist culture. And that is this idea, frankly, this religion almost, of liberalism, of secularism, but of determinist materialism. That everything is about what you want to do, what you think is best for the moment, for the material, for your material gain, and for where you are right now. And there is nothing greater than that. There is no higher purpose in life. And even if you are religious in any capacity, it is better that you be one of those quiet, contemplative religious who don't actually contemplate much except for how much is in their bank account. And these are the people who unfortunately are the lukewarm, who, as our Lord says, we spit out of his mouth. Because the lukewarm are a very sad people, very dangerous people as well, because they do not lead people to eternal life, but frankly they commit the sin of scandal, and they show people that their religion doesn't really matter to them. And when people see that your religion doesn't matter to you, they recognize the reality that you're espousing, which is that religion doesn't really matter at all. There is no necessity for conversion when all that you have around you are lukewarm examples. If someone does not show to you that they truly love God and love what their purpose in life and love every moment that He has given to them, then why would you ever want to convert? Why would you want to be a Christian at all? So, either way, this video has gone on long enough, I suppose. But this is my first real video, kind of commentary, introduction to the channel. I hope you all have enjoyed listening to me talk about random things this whole time. And I also hope that you appreciate watching me clean my boots. Just to give you a little rundown, I suppose, before I go. Very simple to clean boots and everything. These, I've not touched these or messed with these since I got them. I oiled them when I first got them for some waterproofing. These, I don't think I've done anything with them in over a year. They're starting to suffer. There's some cracks in the leather and everything that I regret not caring for them as I should have. But alas, this is the way things go sometimes. You get busy and you neglect the things that you should be taking care of. And this is a perfect example of why I think taking care of good things, good, proper, well-made things, and maintaining them well is so conducive to the flourishing of a well-ordered moral life. Because if you cannot care for the simple things, the little things in your life, you will see how they crack and they crumble and they fall apart, right? These are not actually falling apart, and I've abused the heck out of these, So that is a very important note, obviously, but when you allow yourself to kind of forget about the little things and the little things that are important, and you focus on only the big things. If I said, oh, I can't do this because of money, I only focused on that, I wouldn't have good boots, obviously. I wouldn't be as comfortable or well protected when I go to work and when I stomp around the forest in them, or around the sawmill in them. And I also would not have this perfect metaphor for the small things, the simple things in our life. A great saint, who I think we all know and love very much, is Saint Therese of Lisieux, who was a Carmelite nun, and just the other day was the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Saint Therese was a Carmelite, and she died at a young age, but part of her beatification process was the uncovering of her book, her writings, The Little Way, whereby she discusses the importance of the little things on the road to holiness, to sanctification. By being holy in the little things, we might eventually persevere in faith and in holiness and be fully sanctified and share in the divinity of God in heaven, which is a wonderful promise. And I think that's something that, at least as a man, ownership of something nice, care for something nice, stewardship of something nice, right? You care for something that you only have the capacity to attain because God has ordained it to be so. When you cooperate with God's grace and take care of the little things, right? These little things, you look after them as diligently and as you should. And you do that little extra, right, to make sure that everything's all right. Maybe you brush them off at the end of the day, you clean the mud off of them before you store them. You will find that you will be rewarded tenfold for the small things that you do. And that is what the little way is. Frankly, it's being able to appreciate the little things and then go the extra mile with those little things. If you're able to do that as a man, dare I say, you will be a good husband. I am not yet a good husband, and I have no, I seek to be a better husband every day, but I have no place to tell any man on how to be a good husband. I have not the experience nor the virtue to do so. But I can say that I know something of caring for well-made things and for quality. And I believe God has given us as men a mind for that and taught us to do these things. Because God is, He is our Father, but He's also a great teacher, right? He's taught us to take care of the things that we love. And if we are able to recognize the little things that we love and that we want to take care of, then it's much easier to maintain a healthy and happy family life and a home life. Obviously, That's the cooperation of multiple different people at the same time, though. So, really have to get in the weeds of that, but really just think of, when you think of the little things that you have, maybe you have a cast iron that you like to take care of and season well, and make sure that it always is properly used. Maybe you have a knife that you don't like to, you like to take care of the edge. You don't want to abuse it, you don't want to destroy it, you want to learn how to use it properly, use it for its purpose. And this is kind of this concept that we see in philosophy, that you might know a thing for what it is for. You might understand something because of its purpose. So if you know the purpose of a knife is for cutting, you know that you must maintain it and keep it sharp. If you know that the point of boots is to protect you, and basically, to protect you, then you know that it is good to keep them up to snuff and take care of them so that they can take care of you. If you take care of God, you nourish your relationship with Him, you nourish your relationship with your wife, with your children, with your friends, with your family, then they will take care of you. And you don't do this because you expect something in return, but because you know that it is proper and that it is good. It is good. Because otherwise, I suppose, on either side of the spectrum, you're being exceedingly selfish. So everyone, thank you for watching. This has been the Cloak and Arrow, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. God bless you all.